In relationships, the speed of life makes withdrawals from relationships, and the speed of love makes deposits. The speed of love is a walk. It's a slower pace. You're pouring into relationships. You're making space for relationships. And I think when people try to do life at the speed of life, then they're going to pay the price in the relationships of their lives. We go bankrupt in relationships.
Welcome into episode 2 of the Church of the Springs podcast, where we're breaking down the series that we are currently in, Parental Guidance Required. And last week, I introduced you, but I did not introduce myself.
Oh.
We just went.
Oh, I'd like to introduce you to my host, Luke, Sylvia.
Yes.
The master of podcasts.
That's a bit far, but we'll take it. And this is Ron Sylvia. This is our lead pastor. If you didn't catch last week's episode, this is my dad. How's everything going? Week 2, we just finished Parental Guidance Required. How are you feeling after week 2? And what's kind of been the feedback so far? I know you talked about your conversation with Bo Williams in the lobby after week 1.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I have met so many new parents, like on the deck, in the lobby, and conversations, and how much they appreciate hearing. And honestly, a lot of them came because they heard of the series.
And that's a great point too, because there's so many families, families of like 5 to 8 that you see come through the doors that just have not been here before, haven't been to church before. And when you mentioned the deck, if you were listening to this and you're someone who maybe didn't come to the deck after the service, we would encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
Because that's where you can connect with some of our pastors on staff. My dad is at the deck. Thomas Pesto as well here on staff mans the deck. So you guys come there, say hey. We'd love to meet you. But going in and talking more about week 2 here, can you give listeners just a quick overview of what the message was?
Yeah, this week we were looking at parenting in the digital age. And we talked about, there's all kinds of stats and studies done on the impact of technology on this generation and all generations. But we talked about the importance of building guardrails, digital guardrails, technology guardrails in your home, and the guardrails being the boundaries that you set for your kids and yourself as parents in the home. And we even talked about from there, because technology is like one of the big battlegrounds of parenting today. How much screen time do you give them? And, how do you cut back on screen time? How do you get them off of screen time without a battle and a war? And that led us right into discipline. And how do you discipline your children? And talk through some of that. It was just kind of laying out, and we gave a ton of resources as well, and pointed parents to that.
Yeah, it was Bell Shoals Church is the one that you guys can. I'll put the link to that in the description of this. But you guys can go to their website. They laid out how to handle the boundaries and this technology and being knowledgeable about it. And it was interesting, you brought this up before we started recording, and on the topic of tech, is Disney had like their convention reveal where they talk about everything that's happening in Disney over the next, I don't even know how many years, but they cover a lot of ground. And one of them was Toy Story 5 coming out and the battle against technology, which is so fitting.
Yeah, and it is because the toys are facing a new villain in its technology.
Yeah.
And because kids don't play with toys as much today, they're drawn to the screen and technology and cool things. And, and of course, they promoted it, and then you find out it's coming out in June of 26.
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, man.
Yeah, they're going to ride the hype train until then. And also, if you tuned in last week, we linked the small group questions as well as a 5-day devotional in the description of this episode as another resource for you guys to make the message live past Sunday, because that's the big goal of this, is to kind of go behind the scenes of the message with whoever taught here at the Ocala campus for the series, but as well as keeping the conversation going, because it's so important. It's easy to, in a sense, you're meditating on the word of what was spoken and what was taught. And when we're not doing that, we find ourselves getting out of the groove. And in parenting especially, it helps a lot to continue to meditate over the words of what I should do, how I should parent my child. And, we talk about tech, and you talked about tech in this message, as well as discipline and what that looks like. But before we do that, I wanted to take a piece of the small group questions and use that for this episode to kind of give people another peek behind the curtain of what that looks like. If you're interested in this is what you'll see. Things like this, right? We always provide an icebreaker. The icebreaker I wanted to talk to you about. The icebreaker this week is, if you had to eat one type of food for the rest of your life, what would it be? So we're talking like breakfast, lunch, dinner. This is the type of food you're eating, or just whenever you're hungry. Maybe you eat no breakfast, lunch, and dinner instead of just breakfast or not breakfast at all.
So only one food for the rest of your life.
Type of food. That's important.
Oh, type of food.
Yes.
Like I could get a category of foods.
Yes. A type. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say like Kit Kats and candies.
But
that
fine.
would make sure the rest of my life is shorter.
You would still accomplish the goal, though. It's one type of food, and that's what you got to do. I think for me, it is probably any type of like Asian food, whether it's Chinese, Japanese, and to be more specific, like hibachi. I'm a sucker for hibachi. Here in Ocala, we've got Tony's Sushi. We've got Grace Sushi, which is closer here to the church. That's where a lot of us go.
Are they sponsors of the podcast?
They
probably should be.
Reach out to us. But it's hibachi, or it's like just Mexican food, burritos, tacos, quesadillas. And you think in the vein of Mexican food, that might be the way to go. Because now that I'm thinking of it, you could do like a breakfast quesadilla. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Taco Bell's got their whole menu.
You're really focused on this food thing,
hey, that's part of the icebreaker, and we're breaking the ice.
That's good.
Now, the question that we've got on the small group, the question that I chose here from it was, what are some ways that we can cultivate a greater sense of God's presence and involvement in our daily life and in our interactions with others? How do we make that pour into that?
I touched on it, I think, in the message too. The third point, it's slow the pace of your family, the speed, and I know for me, when I'm running at a breakneck pace and I'm going from meeting to meeting to meeting, and I'm just in survival mode, and unless we step away and step out of the race, we're not going to see and sense God's activity in our lives. We're not going to see things that are blessings in our lives when we're trying to figure out problems in our lives. And the rhythm, I think it's a walk with God is the rhythm and the cadence of your relationship with Him, which is, every day, beginning the day with Him. It's even, I don't know if anybody else does this, but you throw up prayer flares. Throughout the day, you're in a relationship with Him. And so it's like, before you go into a meeting that's, is going to be intense, it's just, throw it up. Say, God, I'm going to need your wisdom in this. Because you're in this constant conversation. I think that makes you aware that God is involved in your everyday life.
And it's interesting you say that, kind of those prayer flares, right? And to your point, that's what you do when you have a relationship. It's when you have a relationship with somebody, anybody, right? It's a call, it's a text message, it's quick. And for me, and what that looks like in my life, when I was talking to a counselor a couple of years ago, kind of just navigating parenthood, maybe it was a year ago or so, but she said you need to do something to kind of ground yourself or realign yourself to juggling the hats of I work and then I come home and I'm a dad. How do you do that? And for her, and what the advice that she gave me was, before you go into your home, you pray a prayer flare, in the sense of, God, give me the wisdom and help me transition into becoming a dad here.
That's really good.
Because you're stepping into, who knows? You come home, it could be that the kids are quietly playing and your wife is making dinner and it's perfect. Or it could be that you walk into your house and the kids are screaming, they're upset about something. You have no idea coming home what that's going to look like.
Yeah, you don't know if it's dinner time or war zone.
Right? Guerrilla warfare, guerrilla warfare, which is what you referenced in the sermon this past weekend about that. Just like the two-parter there, right? Is that, like this? It's great. Parenthood is awesome, but also there's guerrilla warfare involved, and that is the battle with technology. That's just the battle of parenting in general. And so I thought that prayer flare is a great quote. I've never heard that, so that's amazing. But that's what I do before I walk in the house, every time before I walk in the house, because I have no idea what the state is going to be, what the mood's going to be. You just don't know. So that's a kind of something that you guys can implement too, and a good way to do the things that we talked about, like cultivating the greater sense of His presence. Yeah. It's hard to pray for something, and whether that's wisdom, whatever it might be, gratitude, it's hard to do those things and then walk into a situation and be not the best version of yourself. If you just kind of take that second to realign your faith and what's going on and what you're about to endure. So yeah, that was one of the questions from the small group. Again, you guys can click that in the link in the description, and there's a lot more of those questions there that are really good. You talked briefly there, speed of life versus speed of love. And in that point, you mentioned our kids are experientially rich and socially poor. And could you probably kind of just provide context around that for maybe those who have forgotten or didn't get to listen to the message?
Yeah, I said that they were relationally poor. I think they're socially at a surface level. They got a lot of friends, but relationally, they have all the experiences. I said, you can choose to do life at the speed of life or the speed of love, and the speed of life is a fast pace. It is, and in relationships, when you're moving fast, you're in this hydroplaning mode. You are skimming the surface. You're not even touching the ground. You're moving so fast, and so when you're in that, you're in relationships. The speed of life makes withdrawals from relationships, and the speed of love makes deposits. The speed of love is a walk. It's a slower pace. You're pouring into relationships. You're making space for relationships. And I think when people try to do life at the speed of life, then they're going to pay the price in the relationships of their lives. We go bankrupt in relationships.
Would you say that's easier said than done?
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm a preacher. It is. It's easier to say that, but when you, I mean, I didn't make that up. Somebody else I heard years ago said it, but it's like it makes sense because how many times have we seen the results of marriages falling apart, of relationships ending, that because you stop making deposits.
And the biggest way you said was that like they don't. Our children don't need perfect parents. They need present parents. And so you talk about it briefly in the message, but this means doing things like putting your phone away. And this is something like this message was convicting for me as someone who now can use the excuse, oh, I work in social media. I'm working. To which Lauren says, stop working. when it's 6 or 7, or I'm like scrolling through reels and getting ideas for things. And it's hard. That is so hard because I think it was it last week or this past message where you talked about you've got kind of, you can have just those times where the phone, it's not in your pocket.
Yeah.
But it vibrates and could have sworn it vibrated.
Yeah.
But it didn't, because it's become kind of an extension of ourselves. And it is so scary because it's so true. But around dinner tables, putting your phone in the basket, maybe starting there, because I know for a lot of people, they're like, I'll put my phone away for the night. I can't do that. Right. Let's start small. Put it away at dinner. And just have the interactions with your children, with your spouse, whatever that looks like for you. But that's just one example. What would you say are maybe some other, do you have any other like practical tech examples of how to really go back to that question of cultivating a greater sense of God, and also the speed of life for speed of love? Yeah. What does that look like for speed of love with technology?
Well, I think it has to be doing less. It's that the hardest thing is that, I mean, let's be honest. For all of us, your phone and technology is one of your addictions.
Yeah.
Just call it what it is. Yep. Because we can't put it. Whenever we set it down, we feel disconnected and unavailable. And there's FOMO happening. What's going on? Am I going to miss a text? Am I going to miss
right?
A notification? What? And I think, man, back when I was growing up, we had like payphones.
One of the things that you talked about was the amount of times that you look at your phone, and people might not know what that is or what that stat is, but it is on your phone. I believe they have it listed as like pickups. How many times do you because your phone, obviously, if it's locked and you look at it, your phone turns on. That's technically a pickup.
Doing right now.
Exactly.
Okay.
And transparently, I heard you say that, and I was like, "There's no way, not me." Mm-hmm. I looked the previous day. I had picked up my phone 252 times.
You're above average.
I'm an overachiever. And to go a further note, just being transparent, looking at screen time, that's super convicting in general. And my screen time, it has gone up a little bit since I work in social media, but it's like 6 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it's insane. And, because I'm watching YouTube videos and I just leave it there and it's background noise, whatever it is. But it has just become such a part of us that people need to be probably pretty honest with themselves. Mm-hmm. Look at your screen time, look at your pickup time, and just make the goal of like, this week I'm going to have an average.
Well, you can
lower than average time.
You can set an alarm on your phone so that if you want to allow 4 hours of screen time or 2 hours of screen time in a day, you can set there's a feature that when you hit that, you get a warning and then it shuts off.
Interesting.
But then it comes back on and says, do you want to, basically a snooze button.
They have it for apps too. Yeah. And
if you need to know how to do that, Ryan Parquette, our student pastor, he does that every day. And it goes on, and he just hits snooze, man.
And I think we're all guilty of it. Yeah. And it's hard, but that is part of what it looks like to have the speed of love, to have conversations and not worry about the conversations on your phone. Because every time that you look at your phone when you have your spouse in front of you or anybody in front of you, it is saying and communicating, sorry, this is more important than what's in front of me, than you. And so for us, we just need to get back to the speed of love, because it's hard to do once you've already gotten to the speed of life. And that's just saying yes to everything too. Yeah. You got to start saying no.
And I think we have to learn how to push the eject button on technology, and that's just walk away.
Yeah.
Relationships, play board games, have to just step away. So.
Yeah. Exactly. And another thing that you talked about, which I loved, getting into, you talk about technology, but then you talk about discipline. Mm-hmm. So let's switch gears to discipline. Okay. Because the battle there and the back and forth is discipline versus punishment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, punishment, we think methodology, right? The big debate. Do I spank my kids? Do I give them time out? Do I restrict them? Do I take things away? And here's the thing about punishment. You have to punish your kids. I get that. But because they do things wrong or they break the rules or they do something dangerous. So, but with punishment, it's different for every kid. I mean, some kids respond well to things like, some will respond well to, I could take things away from them, and it's going to break their heart and they're going to cry.
Yeah.
And I think every kid is unique, and so you have to figure out what works best for every child.
And let me help you, parents, if you have not come to this conclusion. If you have a child that's about to be 2.5, nothing works. So don't be discouraged when you try spanking, you try yelling, you try gentle parenting, and none of it works. You're not alone at all.
Yeah.
That is something that my wife and I are experiencing daily. What do? Do we take things away? It doesn't matter. Our daughter cries louder, and nobody gets better in the situation. And that's very hard. But that doesn't mean that eventually there won't be a best suited parenting style, disciplining style for your child.
Yeah. And we talked about the big difference between punishment and discipline. And punishment is in the moment. Discipline is for the future. Discipline is more the guardrail that we put in place for our kids. It's for developing them. It's for their good. And punishment is in the moment. But the big challenge in punishment is that we usually punish because we're angry.
Yep.
And Paul says, parents, fathers, don't provoke your children to anger in Ephesians. And he says, discipline them. So when it comes to anger, for parents, there are sometimes if you're angry at your child, that's not the time to punish them.
Walk away.
Walk away. Send them to their room, let them think about it, and you go to your room and think about it.
I am connecting the dots here. Every time I got sent to my room, it wasn't for me.
That's right.
It was for you.
Yeah.
It was for mom to be able to think, for you guys to decompress.
Yeah.
Because at that point, I'm already upset and whatever, and then I go to my room and I'm cool by the time you guys come back, and then the discipline actually happens. Hey, we're going to take this from you your phone from you for a couple days or whatever it might be. Or if you're a kid, I'm going to take the toy, I'm going to take the gaming console, whatever it is there. But they're also in scripture, and this is what you talked about as well, when you're talking about discipline, is, was it Proverbs 13:24, where it's talking about whoever spares the rod hates their child, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them.
Right.
And so often I feel like this message is just used the wrong way. It's like, oh, you see that? Whoever spares the rod, they're definitely talking physical, and you need to spank your child.
That's it, man. Take off the belt.
It's like they read the first half, but they don't dwell on the second half.
Yeah.
And the second half of that being, like I said, the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. And the point you made was the rod or your staff, which also in the scripture talks about your rod and staff comfort me. It's because they weren't used to beat you, right? And it's you made the comparison about shepherds when they basically use their staff to guide, but they do use it for physical harm, but against predators.
Right. They're protecting their flock,
and that's also can be tied into technology, right? That's why it's important to be up on the trends. Yeah, my biggest fear in life is that I'm out of touch with the technology that my kids have. Because one, it's an ego thing. I love technology. I hope I never get to that point where I don't know what's going on. But this is the reason. The biblical reason is because you need to be aware so that you can do things like fend off predators. Because there's some nasty ones online. Whether it's a bully, whether it's an actual predator with your children, they exist. Yeah. And we can't act like they don't.
Right.
And just being up on that. And
That's
what
good.
What apps, what social apps are they using? If I turn off their texting, doesn't mean that they can still use other apps for social, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. And how do you stay up on that? Because it's a lot, but we need to do it.
Another resource that's out there for parents, Plugged In.
Yes.
Plugged In is Focus on the Family, and they have some great resources on technology and everything from apps to safeguards and you've got to become a student of culture, and you have to understand the world they live in. And just like for me, when you guys were growing up, music was the big thing. It's like, what are they listening to? What
Right.
are they? And Mom and I listened to a lot of really bad music because we wanted to know what the music was,
Right.
and parents the same way. You need to know the technology they're in.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to like it. You're not going to be good at it. They're digital natives. You're not. And but you need to know their world, because if you're in their world, you could learn to understand you could have conversations with your kids and about the games that they're playing, or dive in, get in it with them.
It's funny you mentioned music. I have a story, and we can decide if we want to cut this or not, but I have to tell it because immediately it's what I thought of when you talk about music. I was playing one day, and you probably don't have any recollection of this, middle school or high school. I was playing Rock Band, Guitar Hero, some of the variation. And I remember my door flying open. And the song that was playing, that I was playing Guitar Hero to, was the Blitzkrieg Bop. And you said, do you have any idea what this means? The lyrics of the song? And I was like, no, but I feel like I'm about to. And so we went through, and parents at home listening to this, I'll let you look at the lyrics. It's just some things that I had no idea, but you were up with that music and you were able to tell me, hey, this is a terrible song and we're not probably going to play this anymore because of songs like this. So that's what I thought of when you said music. I was like, yeah, I remember that very distinctly. But also in the what I want to do here is talk about kind of anything that got left on the cutting room floor for you.
Yeah.
From that you might have talked about in capture on last Friday that didn't make it to the message, or just something that maybe didn't tie in, but you feel like it's necessary for parents to maybe dwell on a little bit.
Well, I think I said at one point, discipline is an entire series, and communication, and so with discipline for me, like I've got some notes that got cut. Discipline is correction driven by love, and it always has to be driven by love. It's Proverbs 3:11-12 says, "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline, and don't be upset when he corrects you. For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." And it's like love and discipline go hand in hand. That's why you have to step away before you instill discipline. You got to think through. And just as a sidebar, I don't know if we realize or not, but God never punishes you for your sin. Jesus paid the price. He was punished on a cross for your sin. God disciplines you and corrects you.
How to get better.
How to get better, because he loves you. And as parents, we need to be doing more disciplining, and then the punishment is a quick fix. Punishment is, I got to deal with this, and you feel better, and a lot of times it doesn't gain any ground, and but I think that's the thing. There's we talked about the 5 C's. Some of the things about discipline that you need to, first of all, you need to be clear. You need to be clear with your kids on discipline. Clearly communicate ahead of time. Like for instance, this is the punishment. Okay, this is the discipline. This is what you're going to lose. You say, if you blank, then I really want to be clear on this, that your choice will result in blank. And that works great with teenagers, because when teenagers, and they break curfew and they come home too late. When you're sitting down with your teenagers and they know they broke curfew and they know the discipline and what they would lose because of it, you could sit down when they walk in 2 hours late and go, "Hey, man, I'm so glad you're home safely." I really am. I was getting really nervous, but I hope you had a good time tonight. And I was getting a little worried, but then I started feeling bad for you, because I know it's going to be a drag for you to be home with your parents for the next 3 weekends. But then it hit me. You thought about that too before you made this decision.
Right.
And I'm really sorry you made that choice.
Yeah.
I love you. Good night.
And I'll just let this be known. I never broke curfew. My brothers, on the other hand, they broke curfew. They had that conversation. We never had that conversation. No, I think that's awesome. And I think when you're talking about discipline out of love, and it's also like God knows your potential. God knows what needs to happen for you to live the best life that he has for you. And like you talked about in the last episode, how he can unfold you and how your parents can aid you in unfolding you into the person that he wants you to be and that he made you to be.
And we're going to, this weekend, talk about that. Helping your child find their true identity in Christ. And you've got to ground them in who God created them to be. And you've got to notice the gifts and the skills and the interests, and but you got to give them a groundwork of this is who God says that you are. And I'm going to talk about that at length, and because today we have so many outside rapids and currents coming into our homes, trying to the battle on identity today. It's gone crazy.
Yeah.
How do you help your kids navigate it? That's this weekend.
And that's a great segue into, so next episode that you guys tune into, we'll be talking about that message, talking about identity. It'll be, it's a heavy topic, but it's heavy because it's so important.
Yeah, and it'll be a PG-13 weekend.
That's a good point, yep.
In the room, which we mean, if you have younger children, you'll want to take them to Springs Kids, because if you don't, you'll have more to talk about at lunch than you want to.
Yeah. So, next week, this coming weekend, don't miss that. If you do miss it, it will be online. The message will be online, and as well as an episode on Wednesdays, which if I didn't say it already, that is what's going to happen with these episodes. Every Wednesday morning, I believe I scheduled them to post at like 5 a.m. so that people can listen on their way to work or getting ready, whatever that looks like. So anything else to add before we get out of here?
Nope.
All right.
It's going to be a fun series.
All right. Well, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Don't miss the message this weekend, and we will talk to you guys next time. See ya.